Okay, we'll be starting a shiur on continuing the shiurim on סימן Kuf Tzadik Ches, Hemshech of Dinei Chatzitza. Like I said, tomorrow is going to be a first shiur in the Chasei. The Tur in Sif Yud Aleph discusses when there is a arrow, chetz, a koitz, or a splinter, which is stuck in a person's skin. He says, if it's visible from outside, it's chaytzis. If it's not visible, it's not chaytzis. Now, if there is a krum on it, if there is the skin grew on top of it, it's not chaytzis in any way, shape, or form. The Bach over there right away points out, what is the im'enoi nire that the Shulchan Aruch, that the Torah is talking about? Does that mean im'enoi nire mi bachutz means it's not visible at all? It's completely submerged inside the skin, or that it means that it's not visible, that it's sticking out from the skin, but you could see through the skin that it's there? And the Bach says, and he says the same that's mashma from the Smag, from the Sefer HaTruma, from the Mordechai. The only time that you don't have to be a machmer if it's visible is if there is a krum, if there already grew skin on top of it, it's not a problem. The Shach points out, when discusses the Shulchan Aruch, Shach points out that the Beis Yosef also had a suffix on this idea. If you look at the Beis Yosef is long, the Shach points out what's ein nire, and he says that it seems like from the Beis Yosef is also machmer, that's the chumrah, that if it's, and how does he explain what it means? Is if it's at the same level as the skin, that means it's inside the skin, the splinter is inside the skin, but it's on the same level as the skin, it's not inside all the way, it's on the same level as the skin, then it's considered a chatzitza. And if it's pushed inwards and it's not stuck, it's not even on the same level. Forget about if it's sticking out. If it's not on the same level, if it's already inside, then it's not considered a chatzitza. That means it doesn't make a difference if it's inside, deep down, and you can still, even if you see from outside that it's there, but since it's already deeper than the level of the skin, then it's not a problem. It's not considered a chatzitza. But if it's on the same level as the skin, it is considered a chatzitza. And if it has a skin growing on top of it, even if it's not visible, it's still considered, even if it's visible, even if it's the same level, it's not a problem. It's because skin growing on top of it, it's already no longer a chatzitza. Now, if it's sticking out of the skin, it's obvious why it's a chatzitza. Question is, why is it when it's on the same level as the skin, why is it considered a chatzitza? Doesn't make any sense why, if it's exactly the same level as the skin, it should be a chatzitza. It's already totally inside. So Pischei Zuta points out that the reason is, simple practical reason, it's on the same level as the skin, when it ends at the same level as the skin, then essentially the tip of this splinter, by where it's in the edge of the skin, it's pushing inwards some of the skin around the splinter. And that point where the splinter is pushing in with it some of the skin, because it's in the same, exactly smooth, then that piece of the splinter is a chatzitza for the skin that's sitting right around it. So, and why is it that if it's totally inside, it's completely inside, it's not considered a chatzitza? There's two reasons. The Beis Yosef in the name of the Rashba says because she's not makpid, and we know if she's not makpid, you're not makpid, and it's not something like that, you're not makpid anymore to remove it, because you can't remove it so easily, then it's not considered a chatzitza. But the Lavush and the Tahara and other ones hold that the reason is because once it's inside the skin, it's no longer considered outside, it's considered a mokim balua, doesn't need to have bias mayim, and therefore it is not a chatzitza anymore. What's an afkamina between the Beis Yosef and the Lavush and Siddur Tahara? Very simple. If she is makpid, if according to the Beis Yosef, it brings the shame that Ashba, if she's makpid, then it is chaytzis, because we know if a person is makpid on something which the rest of the people are not makpid, the Roiv is not makpid, but she is makpid, then it is chaytzis, except for if you go with the shit of the Gulasilius, which we're not going to get into right now, which we discussed in the past. But otherwise, but if you consider it that it's not an issue of that it's not the because of kfeda. It's not because of kfeda, but it is because of mokim balua. Then it's not a problem. L'maise, if it's before Tvila, then obviously you should remove it. And obviously because we know that if it's we know that if it's a even something which you're not makpid on, you should not toivel with. If you yourself are makpid, then at least to be yotze the shit of the Rashba, you should remove it beforehand if she's makpid on it. However, if she is lonsa in baila, then you no longer have to. You definitely have a reason to be mekel. That's how the Piskei Be'er Moshe explains what should be the situation in such a scenario. Now, the Gula Silius, which is in Perek Yud, Mishnah Ches, Piskei Daled, it's not in the white books because I forgot to put the last 2 pages of the Gula Silius into the book, but it's there. It's the last paragraph of the Gula. It's the last section of the Gula Silius. Gula Silius ends with this thing. He explains. He actually takes a position, he seems to take the position similar to the Rashba. That if her idea if her das is that she wants to remove it, she's makpid and she wants to remove it right now, it's choitzitz even if it's inside. Even if it's inside. Now, she could remove as much as she could remove. Once she removes whatever she could remove, and whatever is left inside, she just can't remove it anymore right now. She's just going to leave it there until she goes to the doctor, until it heals by itself. Then whatever is inside, whatever is left, that's not a chatzitza, because the Gula Silius Lashitase, that also with the way he explains the scabs on the wounds, that if you want it to stay there until it's healed, it's considered that she's not makpid, or that she's makpid to leave it there. So even though you wanted to remove it, but since right now you don't want to remove it, you want it to stay there, so it's not considered a chtzitza. But otherwise, if she is makpid on it, if she is makpid to remove it, if she is makpid to take it off, then he seems to imply that we do follow the shit of the Rashba, that she should remove it and it is choitzes. However, if she's not makpid, then he takes the other shitta. He takes the shitta like we mentioned the Siddur Tahara. He doesn't mention the Siddur Tahara by name, but that shitta, that it goes because it's balua, so it's not an issue of chtzis. So he takes both shittas. When a woman who's makpid, he says she should remove as much as she can, and when a woman is not makpid, he says it's the reason is because of balua. Now, based on that, the question comes up: what's the din about stitches? So Piskei Be'er Moshe, when he discusses it, he says that whatever is outside the skin is definitely choitzes, regardless of whether it is dissolvable stitches or not dissolvable stitches. Whatever, that then you have to cut or somehow not go to mikveh until it's like that. And if it's dissolvable stitches, then only what's inside the skin is not choitzes, but what's outside the skin still is choitzes. And if it's inside the skin, if it's not dissolvable, then whatever is inside is also choitzes. But based on what we just mentioned before, if you are based on the way that Gula Silius explains, and it's a machzedek, when it comes to a bandage, not a bandage, to something which is on the skin, and you're makpid to leave it there, that there are certain scenarios where it would not, especially according to Gula Silius, where it would not be considered a chatzitza. When it comes to stitches, the chayra, there are certain scenarios where you might be able to say it's not considered chatzitza, but obviously there's something which the Rav should be able to discuss with the... What?
You want to use some scenarios?
What? Sakana?
You want to find wood, you say yes. It's not chatzitza.
When would you say it's not a chatzitza?
There are scenarios.
There are scenarios. When in cases of sakana, to remove the stitches, then and there's no way to do it, it's a sakana to it, then discuss it with the Rav, and maybe he'll find a shidduch that it's mutter.
Even for the part that's sticking out?
Yeah. Because she's makpid, it should stay there. According to Gula Silius, if you're makpid, it should stay there. Regarding the shidduch of Gula Silius, yeah. If you're makpid, it should stay there, then it's not the same. It's not the.
Does everyone use only to discuss the stitches?
No, a lot of other people do. I just mentioned him as one of the examples because he's the one he's one of the biggest poskim when it comes to anybody who's going to do shimush and maris over here is going to his talmidim. So he's the one that should be mentioned. Whether they're going to Skvera, the Bertzin, or anybody else, it's all talmidim of his talmidim, or talmidim of him, or talmidim of his talmidim. Okay, that is regarding Seif Yud Aleph. Now, regarding Seif, you go now to Seif Yud Daled. You go through certain points on each of the Seifim. Seif Yud Daled discusses different kinds of mud. And what is it based on? It's based on the Mishnah Mikvos and Perek Tes, Mishnah Beis, that it's talking about what's chaytzitz. It's not clear if the Mishnah is referring to what's chaytzitz, if inside the mikveh, what's chaytzitz on top of your body, but over there the Mishnah says that tit hayovein, v'tit hayoitzrim. Tit hayovein is mud which is sits in pits in the ground. It's natural mud, and tit hayoitzrim, which is what you make clay vessels from. He says over there, it's one of the things that are chaytzim ba'adam, u'sh'ar kol hatit, and any other kind of mud. Matbilin b'geshu'lach, you could toivel in it when it's wet. That's the lashon of the Mishnah. The Rosh doesn't explain anything over there. The Tur understood this Mishnah to mean, the Tur before we get to what the Tur understood, the Tur mentions that these, the tita boiros, which was what we mentioned, which is inside when you in the pits, and tita yoitzin, which is what you make clay from, and tichel drachim is what's on the roads and people step on it and it gets more compressed. That one, if they are stuck to the skin and they are dry, then they're chaytzitz. That means, but if they're wet, they're obviously not chaytzitz. Aval sha'ar titim, but any other kind of mud, afilu yovish in the chaytzitz, even if it's yovish, it's not chaytzitz. That's the shit of the Tur. Everybody tries to understand how the shit of the Tur fits over here. So you have the Bach. It's pretty clear from the Tur that he holds that the only three which are considered echtzitze are these three tough kinds of mud, which those when they're dry they make they're chatzitza, and every other ones, whether they're dry or they're wet, they're all fine. That's how the Bach explains the Tur. That's how everybody understands the Tur that way. And what's the reason for it? It's because that's how he understands the Mishnah. And you see in the Gula Silius, he points out that's how he explains the Bach discusses it. The Beis Yosef explains it, how the Tur got to this idea based on his understanding of the Mishnah. The Rambam has a completely opposite way of understanding the Mishnah. He takes all the way to the other extreme. These three that we mentioned, which is Tita Beiris, Tita Yoitzrim, Tichel Drachim, all these three are chaytzitz even when they're wet. And the other ones are chaytzitz only when they're dry. Any other one, except for these three, are chaytzitz only when they're dry. These three have a special category. Why are these three special categories? We're going to see soon. Based on all the poskim almost all the poskim can pretty much follow the shitta of the Rambam. The Beis Yosef brings it in on the Tur. Shulchan Aruch obviously paskins, it's the same as the Beis Yosef paskins, the same thing as Seif Yud Daled. The Bach points out to you that there's a Mordechai which writes that even in the other kinds of mud, which the Shulchan Aruch, which the Rama said, which we smashma from the Rambam, that they're only chaytzitz when it is dry. Only chaytzitz when it's dry. When it's wet, it's not chaytzitz. If she is makpid on it, it's still chaytzitz. And the Rama brings it as one of the shittas. The Bach goes even more extreme. He says, because we're not baki in which kinds of muds is what, any kind of mud is chaytzitz. Now, we don't have the Alter Rebbe on the Siman, but we do have the Alter Rebbe on Hilchos Netilas Yadayim, and over there he discusses all these scenarios that are discussed in the Sif, and pretty much these kinds of chatzitzes. It's in Siman Kuf Samach Aleph, and a little bit of it is in Seder Netilas Yadayim Mesuda. In the back of the Siddur, you have a few of the details, but overall, it's in Siman Kuf Samach Aleph in Eirachaim. Over there in Sif Gimel, the Alter Rebbe says, Tita Beiris is hayoytzrim, shehem nidbokim biyoyser. They get stuck onto you very strongly. And they prevent the water from going under them. Any other one which is dry and gets stuck to the skin, those are chaytzitz. Why is the minig? He says the minig that they were noyeg in that. We went through this Alter Rebbe in the past. I'm going to go through it again because they get to the sif. Mashallah nagul naker, that they did not. The minig in Russia in those days was not to clean the tit which is stuck under the fingernails. The reason for it was because ein makpidim la'asiroi. Because in Bimdinei Seilu, when they wash their hands on a regular day, not when they wash for Netilas Yadayim, when they wash their hands on a regular day, they're not makpid on it. Therefore, but it's not chaytzis for Netilas Yadayim. Yeah, afilu hu tita boiris v'ayotzrim. Even if this that's under the nails is a tita boiris v'ayotzrim, these tough ones, because the minig is they're not makpid on doing it, then it's not chaytzitz. Yeah, just point out that he brings over here a filu hutita beres eretzim, which we hold that those are from the three tough ones. He says because because these people are not, because the majority of they don't clean under the nails when they wash their hands. That kind of tit, it's not chaytzitz. Which means the mashmas al Alter Rebbe is that he follows the shitta that the reason is because of akpada, like the Rashba and the Beis Yosef, not because of balua. Yeah, who would consider balua regarding yechetz, which is the idea that it completely goes based on akpada. Avalimu makpid olav tzarich lasir. If he's makpid on it, you have to remove it. That means we still go based on his akpada. This is the shit of the Mordechai. He brings the Ramah, like the Ramah over here. That if him who makpid olav, we still have to remove it. Then he says, anything which a person is with roiv from the other, not makpid, even if you're makpid, but ladaita, but that only applies to Netilas Yadayim, not to tfilas kol haguf. So far, this is the three shittas that we have. The shit of the Tur, that we have the three are only chaytzitz. These three are chaytzitz when they're yavish, but not when they're lach, and all the other ones are not chaytzitz even when yavish. The shitta of the Rambam, that these three are chaytzitz, lach or yavish, and all the other ones are chaytzitz only in yavish but not in lach. And then the shitta, and then pretty much the shitta of the Bach, that you should be machmir because we have no idea which one is what. And you have what the Mordechai says, if you're makpid yourself, then we have to be machmir on it. The Gulas Ilyos on this Mishnah is a Perek Tes Mishnah Beis, Piska Daled. It's on page 464 in your white books. Discusses what the Rambam says in the Pirush Mishnayos, and over there, after he discusses what the Rambam says and Bechlal this idea, he brings a Tosefta that's also mentioned in Maseches Mikvos. The Tosefta over there says that if you have a ring which became tummy and it fell into a levana shaltit, into some form of brick or something which is made from clay, from mud, taifeach, and it's wet. Ve'itbila, and you put it into the mikveh while it's inside this matahira. However, if it's from that tit yovein, the one that's in the tit habayres, then it's as if not. And based on this Tosefta, the Gulas Ilias points out three things that he learns out of it. First of all, he says this Tosefta is a stila to the Tur. Why? Because the Tur is matir tit hayovein when it's lach. He understands it that when it's yovish, it's not that when it's only when it's yovish it's chaytzitz. When it's lach, it's not. Over here we see that when it comes to the ring, and this tit is tefeach, it's still chaytzitz, which means that this Tosefta is stila to the Tur. It's one of the points he says, aside from the fact that the shit of the Tur doesn't make sense to him, but aside from that, also it's still the Tosefta. Second of all, second point that he points out is, he says, I learned a new thing out of this Tosefta. He says, all the poskim explain that what's the reason why titlach, why moist mud is not chaytzes for everything other than those three, is because it dissolves in water. You go into the since it's soft and wet, you go into the mikveh, it will dissolve when you're in the water. And that's the Shulchan Aruch, the Lashon Shulchan Aruch, it dissolves in the water. But from the Tosefta that says that when the ring went with the clay into the mikveh, it doesn't say that when it landed in the mikveh, all the clay around it that's wet dissolved. It says you tevel it with it, you tevel it in it. That means that it still remained there. That bunch of clay remained around the ring, and it's still fine. Which means that it did not dissolve. So therefore, this reason that why this mud is not chaytzit has nothing to do with it being dissolved or not. And therefore, Al-Karachach, he says, we must say that the reason why the other kinds of mud, aside from the three that we mentioned, are not chaytzis, it's not because it dissolves, not nimas, nimche b'mayim. It's not because it dissolves. Rather, because since it's not so compressed, it's not such a thick mud, the water will just filter through it. So it's not a chatzitza because the water will go through, touch the skin, and it'll be fine. But tit hayovein, he says, and obviously by the definition, all the other, these three forms of mud are much more condensed, and therefore the water will not go through them. What's enough kamina halacha? Clear enough kamina between whether we follow the Chiddush of the Gulas Ilias, or we follow the way Shulchan Aruch understands, everybody else understands, and would be in a situation when she went into mikveh with this kind of mud, soft mud on parts of a certain part of her body. And after she walked out of the mikveh, it was still on her. So, if you're going to follow the shit of the Shulchan Aruch, that's because it dissolves. She walked out of mikveh, it still didn't dissolve. So maybe it doesn't work. Maybe it was a chatzitza. But if you follow the way he understands, the Gulas Ilias explains, based on the Tosefta, then she is obviously tahir. Yeah, as long as the water surrounds this tit from all sides, she is fine. Now, it's interesting if you look in Alter Rebbe that I mentioned before, this tit hayoitzer, tit habayres, tit hayoitzrim. It says that the reason is they get stuck. They prevent the water from getting under them. So it doesn't say because it dissolves. That the issue is that the other ones are fine because it dissolves. But when he discusses the ones that are a problem, he says because water cannot get under them. So it seems like from the Alter Rebbe you could understand that he also understood it. This Gulas Ilias must have forgotten that he was a descendant of the Alter Rebbe or married to the descendant of the Alter Rebbe. This idea that it has to do with the water going through it rather than it dissolving in water. Now, but this is where the Gulas Ilias and Alter Rebbe are done with getting along. Now come the next part where he goes differently.
Why can't you say that that's what Nimayach means?
You could say, maybe you could say that the nimche b'mayim means that it's not that
Yes, if you dump mud into water, it's going to disappear suddenly? No, it's somehow...
it's going, if it's soft mud, it's going to, it's not going to disappear, huh?
How much water to the mud?
The mikveh.
It's so that's what it means. The water that would get through, but it's able to push its way through the...
Could be. You could understand that nimche b'mayim means that the water goes through it. You could understand it that way. But then the Gula Silius misunderstood the Shulchan Aruch. It's also possible. I also thought that nimche b'mayim could mean that way, like you just said. But not exactly the way you said it. But I thought that maybe you could fit it into there. The Mordechai, now it comes to the third part that the Gula Silius said. It says, based on this Tosefta, the Mordechai that we mentioned also doesn't make any sense. Why? He says, the Mordechai says if you makpid, if she's makpid, it's chaytzitz. From the svara from the Tosefta, it seems like it's not so. Why? Because the Tosefta is talking about a tabas. A tabas, you can't say the idea of eine makpid. Because by Kalim, you don't have this idea that Roiv Kalim are makpid or Roiv Kalim are not makpid. Yeah, Kalim don't have any brains to make a decision whether they're makpid or not. And when it comes to Kalim, if the Roiv of people are makpid, even if the miut is not makpid, there's still going to be, if the Roiv is not makpid, it's still going to be a problem by Kalim. This was discussed in a different place in Gula Silius when he discusses about Tfilas Kalim. So he says that because the reason has nothing to do with Akpada, it must be that the reason has nothing to do with Akpada. The reason, as we said before, has to do with the water being able to get through it. So therefore he says, being that based on the Tosefta, must be that it's because the water is going through it, not because of Akpada. So it makes no difference whether the woman is makpid or not. Therefore, based on the Tosefta and Reiv Rishonim, and you don't have to be chayshish straight at all. If she wants to be noyig in Tosefes Prishus, she could decide for herself to that if she's makpid, she could decide for herself that to go to mikveh again or whatever it is. But not to paskin like that. Right? But, as I said, Alter Rebbe clearly says if she's regarding tit in the Tilas Yudayim, that imhu makpid olav chaytzitz. So, obviously you can't say that that someone who is makpid on it is a problem, is not, someone who's makpid, even someone who's makpid on it, that's not chaytzitz. But still it's important to know the Gula Silius. Like I said, sometimes you're going to need to know even shittas that you're going to need to know for cases which come your way, and it's always important to have backup svaras. Okay. Siftas Vav. Shulchan Aruch mentions ink, milk, blood, certain forms of sap from trees that are chaytzitz when they're dry, but not when they are wet. But the majority of sap from a tree is chaytzitz even when it's moist. And over here right away I think the Taz, the Shach points out that what the Mordechai says, what the Ramah brings Hashem the Mordechai regarding tit, also applies to all the diyai and chalav and everything else. Yeah, and regarding blood, one of the things it says about blood, if it starts drying, dam shenisach and sifta zayin, if blood starts drying, then it's chaytzitz even if it's a little bit wet. Now, the same Gula Silius which I mentioned before, when he says why by tit, it's even if she's makpid, it's not, even if she's makpid, it's not chaytzitz. He says the same thing applies over here. That even if she's makpid, he says the same logic that applies for tit, and the Mordechai is machmer, and it doesn't fit with the Mishnah, with the Tosefta, same logic will apply also here in diyai and all these other things, that if it goes through, if it's moist and it's not so thick, as opposed to the sap of trees, which is most saps, which is very thick and the water can't go through it, then it's not chaytzitz even if she is makpid. Now, what ink are we talking about? Anybody who has ever dealt with today's ink knows that the ink that is very liquidy and has no mamashas. The diyah that they're talking about over there is thick ink, which has a mamashas, like paint. It's not something which when it dries as something on top of it. Not every ink, a lot of inks today are not like that. But the regular ink is not much. It runs. It's much more liquidy and doesn't leave him amashas. It stains the hand, but it doesn't make him amashas on the hand. And therefore, in today's ink is not the same din as those days ink. That's what I mentioned in the Gufei Halachos and Piskei Moshe. And that's the same mashmos from the Taz, because when the Taz in the next sif on Sif Yuzayin, the Taz over there says that he had a scenario where a woman touched a pot which had which had like black soot on it, and she went to mikveh and it was just dirt, and he said because it has no mamashis, it's not considered a chtzitza. He said as opposed to diyoi, which has mamashis. So the reason for diyoi is only because it is a mamashis. Now we'll move from that to see if
About the teachers in kindergartens, they have morals, right? Paint over there. Not all the paint and ink, but
yeah, but that goes to another thing. So umnosi bekach. So it gets right to the next sif. Sif Yuzayin. Over there it says that if a woman color their faces, their hands, their hair, it's not chaytzitz. The Ramah says, whoever umnosi bekach, and his hands are always dirty with blood, is also not chaytzitz. Why? Sheroiv b'nei umnazu, the majority of people who deal with this specific form of work are not makpid on it. What does ein makpid mean? I also mentioned in the past, it's in the same Alter Rebbe in Kuf Samach Aleph, in the end of Sif Aleph, in Ksav Yads. It's not. It's in some of them that were printed. They have it on the footnotes. So they found in all Ksav Yads. There's an addition in parentheses where it says what? It says Derech Reiv Bnei Adam lehakpid aleim lehasiram kasher roichtzim yedeim. The hakpada means that when they wash their hands for washing their body, not for netilas yadayim, he puts it over there. Same thing. It's written later in Kuf Samach Aleph and Sif Gimel also. Similar idea that the hakpada is not makpid when you do netilas yadayim. It's not the hakpada is not when you're something which is specific hakpada for when you go to mikveh. That I think I also mentioned Achiezer, which we're going to get to soon. But the idea of akpad is when are you makpid on it? Is the majority of people makpid on it when they clean their bodies? You could say the majority of people, they want to eat, they're not going to be makpid to remove the paint. They don't have time for it. If they're going to take a shower and clean their body, they're going to make sure to remove it. So that's considered akpada. Makpidim says Reiv b'nei umnuzur. Not makpid means when they take a shower, when they clean their body, they're not makpid on it. But if they are makpid, then they have to remove it. So people who that's their umnus, they are not makpid on it. And saying it's pretty clear in Alter Rebbe where he mentions all the other ones. He doesn't mention only the Ramah. Only mentions the Shulchan the Ramah only mentions umnasi bekach v'yodas meruchlachos bedam. Talking about the butcher, his hands are filled with blood. Alter Rebbe in Kuf Samach Aleph Sif Hey says diyoi v'atzev alachim. He says if they're wet paint, wet ink is not chaytzitz. Why? Because they dissolve in water. Here we see that it does go based on dissolving, not based on the water going through it. Separates this from the previous ones. If they're dry, they're chaytzitz. As long as you have mamashas. If it's not the mamashas, just a stain, it's not a problem. But if it only has maris atzeva, only the view, then it's not considered a chtzitza. And Alter Rebbe defines each one. Mishu tzeiveya and atzeva chaytzitz al yodav. Someone who's color paints on a regular basis, it's not chaytzitz. Afa pish yesh mamashas tzeiveinu al yodav. Even though he has some mamashas, the color leaves the mamashas. V'chein mishum nosil yeshoichet ekatzev v'chlachas tamen bedam ein chaytzitz. V'chein lemoicher shuman, someone who sells oil, fats, and that's the hardest. One of the hardest things to clean off is grease. It's not chaytzitz. And in the Ksav Yad it also adds the words v'chein mishekoisef tadir, someone who writes always, who's a sofer who always writes, and he says ein adiyoi chaytzitz al yadav, and it's brought from the Magen Avraham, someone who usually writes that diyoi is also not going to be chaytzitz, even if it has mamashas, because that is their. The Rav he says even though the majority of people are makpid, because Reiv b'nei umnus, the majority of people of this umnus are not makpid, it's not chaytzitz to them. But somebody who's not rogel, who's not part of this group of professionals who do it on a regular basis, for him it is a chatzitza. Now, we said in the beginning of this sif that when they color the woman, that they color on their faces, it's not considered a chatzitza. The Rosh says, for a simple reason, because it's noi, it's for their beauty, and they are not makpid on it, and they do it intentionally, therefore it's not chaytzitz. And that's what the Rashba brings. The Rashba brings this reason and brings a second reason. Second reason is because it has no mamashas. Suddenly it brings two reasons. So first you have the Rosh says only one reason because it's noi ve'ein makpidos, and they do it intentionally. The Rashba brings that reason plus a reason, introduces the idea of no mamashas. The Bach and the Prisha only take the idea of ve'ein mamashas. So suddenly now, when it comes to the color, the Bach and the Prisha only allow it when there's no mamashas. Not because it's no ilahem, because it's no mamashas on it. Yeah, what a very simple nafkamina would be, if it's a tzeva which has mamashas on the hands, or on the face, which is done there intentionally, according to the Rosh, it's for sure not a problem. According to the Bach and the Prisha, it is a problem. And according to the Rashba, it brings both the reasons. So you could discuss it either way. You could either say he's machmer, you could say he's not machmer. So from that we move to what question that everybody has, which was already around since the 1920s, at least Chiezer wrote about 1930s, regarding nail polish. According to the Rosh, chayr is not a problem. Why? Did it intentionally? Even though it has mamashas, right? Obviously, it's talking about that she does it intentionally. She wants it to stay. So if it's in good condition, if it's in perfect condition, and she's not going to go to a manicure place to remove it, then it's considered that she wants it there. So, according to the Rosh, please, but the evidence, if she wants to make it, will be fine. Right? However, we have a different problem. Problem is like this. When it comes to the paint that we mentioned before, the Alter Rebbe in Kuf Samach Aleph, Sif Hey, says, Hanoshim shedarkom litzboya yedein lenoi v'kaitzvah ein oisei tzeva choitzatz. So it's not choitzatz. It doesn't goes into discussion. Yesh mamashas, no mamashas. Seems like it doesn't go with the mamashas idea. Right? It goes into whoever, but he says something else. Calls it a miut hayad, only if it's a minority of the hand. Aval im roiv hayad mechus bedavar sheish bo mamash choitzatz. If the majority of the hand is covered with this paint that has mamashas, because it seems very clear that the Rebbe follows the shit of the Rosh, that it's even with mamashas, because it's done intentionally, it's not a problem. But if the majority of the hand is covered with it, it is choitzatz, even to the people which are not makpid, even to them. Why? The probable reason is because if you're only coloring the hand, the whole hand is considered its own aver. The majority of the hand covered with paint, it's roiv of its own. Like we have roiv gufoy, and we have the whole discussion about roiv of the hair, and all the other discussions about how you define roiv of the whole body, with the hair, without the hair by itself, the hair of the head. That discussions we went through before. We're going to mention them passing again soon. But the majority of the hand. So now, when it comes to nail polish, you could have a discussion. How would that work according to the Alter Rebbe? Maybe because all the nails are fully colored, and the nails are its own part, a part of they're makpid only to color the nails, and the nails are completely colored. So if the nails are completely colored, the chayra, it's davashish b'mamashus, so the chayra, it could become a problem. No, why is roiv hayad a problem? Because you're only coloring the yad. What? What's the reason why roiv haseir? It's its own metzias.
I understand. We're creating more. The silence, the Rambam shit, I understand why he says about the silence, but if you keep adding. But
while Alter Rebbe says roiv hayad, why is the yad a problem? Why is roiv hayad choitzitz?
Yeah, but now you're saying that even the nails can be considered.
Maybe, I don't know. Can sein? I weiß nicht. I'm pointing it out. No, I'm pointing it out. Yeah, because the question is, where do you define? I don't know the answer to it. I don't know the answer. I don't know the answer specifically. Where do you draw the line of what's considered its own metzius? Do you say that all the hair? Because Tzemach Tzedek in Kuf Nun Tes, when he discusses the hair, he doesn't go so extreme. He says that all the hair of the head is only considered the roiv of the hair, because it says the Rambam shit about the hair. Hair is independent, but you can't say that the hair of the head is independent from the hair of the rest of the body. So even if the whole hair of the head is covered, it's only considered the roiv of the hair, which means if part of the hair, you do calculate all the hair of the body as one part. So it's not clear where do you draw the line?
Why shouldn't you just use any dharma that already exists? What is it?
Because you have to use a logic behind it. Why the Alter Rebbe says roiv yad?
It's not actually that the...
Because it doesn't.
That's all. That's what you're washing.
So that's what you're washing. So the roiv of the yad does it then.
Also talk about the hand. That's what makes the difference.
So that's the only reason why.
No?
Could be. Yeah, could be. Yeah. Well, it's a question. What do you define as its own part of the body? Now, the Achiezer in Chelek Gimel Siman Gimel did mention in the past, was asked about this. And his, not only on the manicure, but on the idea of the cutting the nails also. And he says, the majority of women are not makpid on cutting the nails when they grow a little bit. The only people who are makpid on cutting the nails are the women before they go to mikveh, and the hakpada is because they took it upon themselves regarding mikveh. Otherwise, they will not be makpid. And when it comes to the manicure, they dafka do not want to cut it. The people who do it, dafka don't want to cut it. They want it to stay nice, they want it to stay long. And therefore, he said, at least it could be that these women should be able to go to mikveh. Now, this idea that if you want it to stay, if you dafke want it to stay, it's not choitzitz, is mentioned in passing in a small Tzemach Tzedek and Piskedinim, the only Piskedinim on Kuf Tzadik Ches, a small paragraph, and it's on page 111, where he explains why makpedes, to leave it, is better than eina makpedes, regarding the hair, the kaltnish in the hair. That makpedes to leave it is stronger than eina makpedes. If you're not makped la'asiroi, it's adif, it's even stronger when it comes to being mekel. So here, when it comes to manicure, they're makped to leave it, not to remove it. So it could be a stronger sweater. Why is this important to know? Pasha that lachatchila can be materet. Why? Simple reason. Even if you want to follow that lachatchila, that it's not a chatzitza, that's not choitzitz. The Ramos says in the beginning of the Siman that even something which is not choitzitz, you still should not taiva with even something which is not choitzitz. If it's on you and it's not part of your body, you should not taiva with it. That's the first reason. But the Eved, if a woman forgot to remove the nail polish, and then time comes to go to mikveh, so it is the idea of the Rav of the community has to know what to make a determination. Sometimes the Rav will have to be machmir, sometimes the Rav will have to be mekel, knowing on the person that you're dealing with. Sometimes you have to know to you be able to use the achiezer, and sometimes you have to realize that some people come, and if you're not going to put your foot down, there's going to be certain people, it's going to be the beginning of a yiride. So as a Rav, you have to be careful not always to find a heter. Sometimes you want to put la'amidam al das emes, to put them on the right path. You have to be machmer, and sometimes if it's not, sometimes you have to send somebody to go to mikveh the next day.
Is makeup less because it's not malicious? Makeup is less because it's not malicious?
Makeup? Depends what?
Meaning it's less severe?
Then what, the nail polish? Depends what makeup. Depends what makeup. Each thing is different. Nail polish is mamish mamoshes.
Is it easier to make on makeup?
No, because makeup, they don't want it to stay. They're going to take a shower and they're going to remove it. They don't want it to stay. Nobody goes to sleep with makeup, or at least not intentionally. Right, but yeah, but you have to know what to do. Now, if it's color which is absorbed, a lot of times when using a marker or something, it gets absorbed into the skin. So obviously you wash it first with soap or whatever it is to see if it comes off. Once it's no longer there's no emotions on top of it, that's it. You don't have to tell a person that they have to go and stick their finger in bleach for 3 hours until they get the color out. It's not, there's no chiyuv to do that. If there's no emotions and it's already absorbed into the skin, it's already a stain in the skin rather than on the skin, then you don't have to be machmer. You can go to mikveh on that. Obviously, if someone comes to you, someone who became frum, and during the time that they were not frum, they had to get tattoos on, also they don't have to remove the tattoos before going to mikveh. Sif Yutches discusses dough and discusses those things, and that we already discussed when we discussed Alter Rebbe last year, a few shiurim ago. We discussed it, and with that, I am going to stop today's shir. The next shir in Hilchos Nida is going to be next week. Shiurim and Hilchos Eruvin are going to be tomorrow, next week also. Mitzvah Hashem.